has begun. Um, a reminder to keep yourself muted during the presentation. If you have questions, you may certainly put them in the chat, or we will have time to take questions where you can unmute yourself at the end of each presentation. All right, Amanda, you're on.
Thank you, everyone. Welcome to the November monthly webinar on this cold, blustery day, at least here where I am. So today, I don't really have a lot of updates about HiSET and PSI, just an acknowledgement of the issues. So here's the agenda that we'll be talking about. Going to try and get through those first 4 bullets pretty quickly so that Abigail from Diploma Center has plenty of time for her presentation. So this is just kind of information for everyone. Those of you who happen to have a HiSET testing center, especially those of you who do paper-based testing, are probably already very, very aware that there have been some significant problems. So the HiSET exam was created by ETS. ETS sold the exam to another testing company called PSI. It was announced a year ago. One would have thought that the transition would have been well organized and that PSI would have had an understanding of all the aspects of the testing and scoring and how to get scores to credentials or to the states and all of that kind of stuff. But it appears not to have been the case. And so there have been really significant problems with the transition. It is not just in Pennsylvania, it is nationwide. It's impacting all aspects of students registering on websites, test center staff having access to information about the students, scoring happening, scores getting to students, scores getting, in our case, to Diploma Center. There have just been issues all over the place. We are aware of them. We sent a survey out to agencies that we have grants with or that are subgrantees, asking you, not requiring you, but asking you if you had information you wanted to share to please submit it. And we're still having, we're still taking answers to those surveys if you have recently experienced some things. We're trying to collect the information so that I can work with our legal and procurement offices in a meeting with PSI to really lay out all of the issues that we're having and what they need to do in order to be in compliance with the contract that we have for them and ensure that HiSET testing, especially paper-based testing, is happening correctly. And that students and testing centers are able to have the information they need in order to accurately test and get someone registered, and that the students, the test takers, can get their scores. So I don't have any wonderful updates that everything's been resolved, unfortunately, but we are aware of the issues. We are preparing for a meeting with PSI, and if you have information you'd like to share, please complete the survey. This is an overview of the NRS data that Pennsylvania just submitted earlier this fall as part of our mandatory statistical reports. So I thought you might be interested in just seeing where things are. We had 12,930 participants. And as a reminder, participant is an individual with 12 or more hours. So it's what we internally called an enrolled student, but NRS refers to them as participants. So we had just under 13,000 in 21-22, and that was up from 10,534 in 2021. So we are seeing or saw a rebound in enrollment from the depths of the pandemic to kind of our second year of dealing with the pandemic, and as we say, the new normal. And so we're hoping to see continued increasing numbers for 22-23. We also had an increase in the number of reportable individuals, and those are the individuals who show interest in a program by completing an intake form. So you have the information to enter them into eData, with all of the required demographics, but they do not reach the 12 hours of participation. So we had just over 5,500 of those. Of course, there was an assumption with increased people coming into the programs, the reportables would increase, but it also, the percentage of individuals who came into the program who did not hit the 12 hours also went up. So in 2021, it was 28% of all the people who came in did not hit 12 hours. Last year it was 30. We of course hope that that will drop significantly this year, because as I say, you and the students are investing time. And in your case, it's the time of staff to do the intake. It's the time of staff to do the data entry. Time of teachers teaching those individuals for the couple hours that they're there. And then they're not enrolling, and then they're not, of course, not persisting in getting outcomes. And we recognize that some of those individuals are going to be the ones who come into your program. You do the intake with them, you sit down and you do an orientation. And, you working together with the students realize that maybe now is not the time for them to enroll in adult education, and you work on helping them address barriers or things like that. Of course, there are always the individuals who come in and decide that the program's not for them. So we realize there are always going to be a certain number of reportable individuals, but we do want that to get probably significant, like under 20% ideally. Our measurable skill gains had a slight increase up to 33.76%. That is lower than the target that we had originally negotiated with Octave, but that target was negotiated pre-pandemic. And there is a statistical adjustment, a model that they apply to our performance to kind of look at conditions that happened. So hopefully that will allow us to meet our target for the purposes of sanctions or not getting sanctions. Table 4B, which I think, the thing with the measurable skill gain, table 4, is of course that looks at all students who have reached participant status, who are at 12 or more hours. So that includes, all the people who left before you could post-test them. But table 4B is the one, and MSG, as we report it to the federal government, also includes the other ways to show measurable skill gains. So for example, earning the high school equivalency credential gets lumped into measurable skill gains for our reporting purposes as a measurable skill gain. And then there are a couple new ways that students in IETs and workplace literacy classes can show measurable skill gain. Table 4B is pre and post tested students only. And pre-pandemic, when we were meeting our measurable skill gain targets and really actually exceeding them, our table 4B numbers were around 66, 67%, right? And we were post-testing more students. So, we're going to need to look, one, getting, retaining students long enough to post-test them, post-testing them at a time that is appropriate for the student to be able to show a gain. So there are minimum hours that you can legitimately post-test them based on the publisher's recommended timeframes, but some students may need longer. And so having conversations with the instructors and to determine when is an appropriate time to post-test the individual so that they will have greater chance of showing gain is also important. So last year, just over half of participants were post-tested, right? So 72 point, no, not 72, 42.5%. No, whatever. 46.5%, there we go, of our students did not get a post-test. And many of those, that's probably appropriate. They didn't reach the point where they should have been post-tested. Some of those individuals probably should have been post-tested and kind of fell through the gaps. So that is something we ask that you pay close attention to. But we also have to balance when, just getting a post-test for someone with, are they ready and are they going to show a gain? Have they shown progress in class that would indicate that they might do better on their post-test? And if not, maybe that's not the best time to post-test them. There's a range of hours that the publishers recommend. There's a minimum hours, a number of hours that they say, this is like really the least number of hours that a student can have and have the potential to show a gain. But many students will need more than that. So it is a balance between, we have to post-test students in order for them to be able to show an EFL gain, but simply post-testing a student is not the purpose of post-testing, right? We post-test them so that we can document the gains that they're showing. And I do recognize that many students show a couple points gain and it's not an EFL gain. So I understand that there's that kind of tension there between post-testing a student to show that they have some gain and it not being an EFL gain. But we do see a lot of students who aren't showing any point gains or actually showing a decrease in scores, and it's possible that they've just been post-tested too early. So, there's kind of this balance between getting students post-tested and getting them post-tested at a time that they can actually show a gain that would lead to an EFL gain. Despite all that, we still saw an increase in the table 4B from the prior 2 years. Slight increases, but it is a little bit higher than it was the previous year. So last year, 54% were post-tested, and 55.5% of those had an EFL gain. So we had a slight increase in the number with an EFL gain. Okay. So for eData, there have been some questions coming in because there are some students that you have who you may do remote assessment with, but then the student, and Christine, correct me if I'm wrong, the student is assessed using remote assessment, but then the student only attends in-person classes. So there have been some questions around how to handle that. So Christine, do you want to explain this slide?
Sure. This is about the use of the DL checkbox is really what this boils down to. So, when to use the DL checkbox. And we've always told you that if they have any remote hours, you use the DL checkbox. But recently, we've had some questions about what to do when the only remote hours are assessment hours. And in that case, we've decided that we want you to not use the DL checkbox. So if a student has a remote assessment, but all of their other hours are in-person instructional hours, you will not use the DL checkbox. Now, this will show up as a data check item, right? Because there's a data check item about somebody with remote hours. I forget the exact wording, but like has remote hours, but the DL checkbox not checked. But a reminder that the data check items are just things to check. They're not necessarily errors. They're things that point you in the direction of, oh, I better check this. This could be a conflict of information. So they will show up as a data check, but we want you to not use it if it's just a remote assessment. Thanks, Amanda.
Thank you. So the post-secondary enrollment certification form. So this is the form that you can use to document that a student who exited your program has enrolled in post-secondary education. And we're getting them. So a couple reminders. One, they can be submitted throughout the year. So under WIOA, we use those post-secondary enrollment forms for a variety of outcomes. And some of those outcomes are outcomes related to the prior program year, and some of them are for students who exited 2 years ago, and things like that. So if you can submit post-secondary enrollment certification or verification forms throughout the year, you do not have to hold on to them. There's not a deadline by which we have to have them. Just if you get one, send it in. We are still requiring original signatures. At this point, we have a fillable PDF of the post-secondary enrollment certification form that has fill and sign option. The challenge is that once the first person, which has to be the student, so once the student has completed the fill and sign step, the form is no longer fillable, and therefore the post-secondary official and the adult ed staff member, they can do the sign portion of filling in the form, but they can't put the date that they completed that signature, quote unquote. We are trying to explore options to make that document more useful as an electronic document with e-signature, but there are a lot of challenges with that. But we do need to have original signatures, and we are still getting forms that are obviously photocopies of signatures. The other thing that is happening is we are getting post-secondary enrollment certification forms that do not have the program entry date for the post-secondary program. So the information about the student that is related to adult education, we ask you to fill that out, but we do have, we do have the student's exit date from eData, but enrollment, so when they start the post-secondary program, we have to have that date because the post-secondary enrollment is after exit. So the adult ed student exited the program and then they enrolled in post-secondary education. That is how the federal government defines our usage of post-secondary enrollment. It has to happen after exit. If we do not have a program entry date, then we can't use it because we don't know if it was before or after. So we must include a program entry date, needs to be original signatures in order, and you can submit them throughout the year. Another set of reminders related to local match that have kind of come up as we've been looking through final expenditure reports and grants. So reminder that federal funds cannot be used as match for other federal funds. And this has come up recently. I know Elle and I had several digital literacy grants that many of you got. Those are federal funds. They're WIOA funds. They are not local match. Can't report them. It's wonderful. Please take the grants, do the work with them, but it can't be reported as local match. As well as local board, like if you get money through the local workforce development board, it is most likely some kind of federal funding. I don't know that the local boards get much state funding at all. So I think you need to anticipate that the local board funds are federal funds and can't be used as local match. If you get money from the local board and they have documentation that it is another funding source, you should retain that document. You should request a copy of that documentation so that you can, if you want to use those funds as local match, you should have documentation that it is in fact not federal funds at all. And of course, when I say federal funds, I don't just mean WIOA funds, I mean any federal funds. And then another reminder around counting staff time as local match. If you are going to count staff time as local match, The staff whose time you are counting must have time and effort sheets. So if you are counting your executive director's time supporting your program and you want to count that time, your executive director needs to be filling out a time and effort sheet. If your executive director doesn't want to be bothered with that, then don't plan on counting their time as local match, because you do need to do that. It's not my rule. That is uniform grant guidance. And that is it. So I am, Christine, were there any questions that popped up?
Yes, we have one question in the chat. I'm not sure. I think this is in regard to the post-secondary form.
Mhm.
What if the program is an approved IET and they are co-enrolled in post-secondary and adult literacy program?
That is not exiting adult education and enrolling in post-secondary. Unfortunately, that is something that just about every state director has pointed out to Octay, but there's not much Octay can do because of how the regulations define things. So if it is an IET and they are co-enrolled, that is not exiting and enrolling in post-secondary education.
Good question, Shirley. Thank you. Do we have it before we move on to Diploma Sender? Do we have any questions about Amanda's portion of the presentation? Okay, I don't see anything in the chat. Okay.
Sharing. Okay.
So, Abigail, are you unmuted?
I am. I'm going to share my, I think I can share my screen. This is not the first time I've done this before. I don't think anyway. All right.
Yes, we see a screen that says hello that looks like a Post-it note or something.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, cool. So hello, everybody. I feel like I might have talked to some of you before through email or maybe some Zoom calls to talk about Diploma Sender services, but if not, hi, how are you? I'm Abigail. I'm joined today by Haley Martinson. We both support the government services side of Diploma Sender, which means we get to interact with all of you. So thank you, Amanda and Whitney, for inviting us to talk a little bit about Diploma Sender. I can get long-winded, so I told Haley to interrupt me if I'm talking too much, but I just wanted to give you a quick overview of Diploma Sender and what your access looks like as a test center administrator, which is what Diploma Sender calls the individuals like you who are what we call advocating for the test takers at the local level, helping them register for tests. I hear the word orientation from Amanda. So if you're orienting them and all the way through completion, so helping them take the test as well. So after they're done testing, the next step is with Diploma Sender. So I want to talk a little bit about that today and then share what our screens look like on our website. By the way, if you do not have a Diploma Sender account, just I'll show you where to register before I finish today, but the goal is for you all to have access to our services.
You know what, Abigail, I'm sorry. I'm going to interrupt you briefly because it occurred to me the people on this are actually program administrators, and so some of them may not know what the Diploma Sender is.
Sure.
So it occurred to me I should probably let everyone know. We do have some new administrators. So everyone, Diploma Sender is the vendor that Pennsylvania uses to manage our high school equivalency test records. Mm-hmm. So when someone takes the HiSET exam or the GED exam, the scores go to Diploma Sender. Diploma Sender manages all of them. You know, a student who passes gets the Commonwealth Secondary School diploma through Diploma Sender. Individuals who need transcripts go to Diploma Sender for that. So some of you are test center staff, so you may have different access to Diploma Sender, whereas some of you may just be teachers or case managers who have helped students, but it's still important to help the students understand how to access Diploma Sender on their own, because you shouldn't be accessing Diploma Sender on their behalf, right?
That's exactly right.
Yes, right. Yeah. So these records are very confidential. Diploma Sender is stickler for confidentiality and making sure only people who should be accessing records are accessing records. So I thought this would be beneficial for those of you who may not do Diploma Center yourselves because you're not a test center, but you have students who are wondering how to go about seeing their records through Diploma Center, which is where they get the transcript and diploma from, versus just going to GED or PSI to see scores. So I'm sorry, I did a little bit of background for everyone. Thank you,
Sure.
Abigail.
Absolutely. Thank you for that explanation. That was beautifully said. It was perfect. Very concise, and it's really nice to hear that description. So thanks, Amanda. So advocating for test takers, I think, is a great segue. So what do you do? How can you help the test taker? And Diploma Center really has to ensure that who we're talking to is the test taker when we're accessing their academic record. Otherwise, there is a portion of our job, of our service, which applies to you all on this call, which is your specific account type gives you access to your assigned test center location. So you're not seeing, well, I'll say what you are seeing. You're seeing test takers who have worked and tested through your test center site. So that's it. It's a very limited view, and we'll go over what that view looks like here in a moment. So a test taker wants to access their diploma. They want to get their transcript, or they haven't quite completed and they want to see what Diploma Center has in the database so far. So we have academic records that go back to way back when, in 1942, when GED first started. So we have a warehouse in Oklahoma that has all of our historical records for all of our 18 partner states. And after 2002, all of the records became digital. So that's where a good portion, over 90% of our testers accessing their records are after 2002, which is great news. So we can move rather quickly, which is great. So to add to what Amanda said, aside from this transition with PSI, the publisher sends us daily imports, and we see those records within 24 to 48 hours after testing. So we see it rather quickly. And as a reminder, Diploma Center is what we like to call a mirror of the publisher. So we're taking the data from the tester's publisher that they decided to choose, and Diploma Center puts it all on a screen for them so they can review their records. So we aren't really necessarily creating data. We're taking that raw data and putting on a screen that what makes sense to that test center. We are very test center focused. We keep them at the center of our worlds for a reason, and I'm sure you all can relate to that. So when we say advocating for the test taker, we say, yes, we want the test taker to know that Diploma Center has chats and phones available for them Monday through Friday. I will show you how to access this document that's in front of you, but it's a business card that you all can print locally and distribute to the test takers upon orientation, or you could also distribute when they're done testing, just so they know where to go and what we mean when we say Diploma Center. What is that place anyway? So send them to the website. They register. Registrations happen rather quickly when we match the account. It all happens within a day, and they can access Diploma Center. And what they can do, I'm going to go over this in a second, so I'm going to skip this part real quick. What they can do is access a complimentary set of documents if they're a first-time passer. So their diploma and transcript are free. If they're ordering a duplicate document, it is $15 each. So the $15 for a diploma and $15 for a transcript. And testers can opt to have them delivered through the mail, good old-fashioned USPS. They can also have it delivered through email, which means it's a very safe and secure process, but they get a code to access their documents and they can print locally. And this is an example of what your documents look like, if anyone's ever wondering. We hear often, like, what does this actually look like? What does a diploma look like? So if you'd like, we can send you examples. They will have void all over them just so we can reduce fraud. But this is an example of your diploma and an example of a transcript without data in it. But if you look at the headers, you can see that it includes test date, score, status, percentile rank, and performance level for both GED and PSI. Okay, well, let's continue. When this presentation's over and you have a lot of questions about what I said, maybe I talked too quickly or I missed some points that you want to know more about, start with emailing governmentsupport@diplomacenter.com. That email address will kind of serve as the operator, if you will, towards getting you your answers. We respond very quickly. In fact, we tend to see that emails lead to phone calls and Zoom calls because it's what's important for us is seeing what you're experiencing. So not only if it's something we need to change, we'll change it for the whole service, not just specific to you. It'll be a change that everybody needs. So we are open to suggestions. We're very curious, and we're just excited that you have the interest to reach out to us. So be sure to email governmentsupport@diplomacenter.com with any questions. Okay, so let's get out of here and let's go over to Diploma Center's website. So I have created an account that mirrors what Diploma Center calls that test center administrator. So it's very limited access to our database specific to Pennsylvania. When I logged in, my home screen, if you will, is your test centers. So upon registration, make sure you add which test centers you're associated with. When you add those test centers, it gives you access to search for specific test takers, and it also gives you access to run reports about the data within your test centers. At the very top of the screen, you'll see download DS contact cards. So that's that business card I shared with you earlier. If I click that, a PDF pops up, ta-da, and you can print this, use it however you want to. The state of Ohio puts these in release packets for corrections. So the individual upon release has access to Diploma Center. They in fact know where to go. And then other states just have them at the test center and they distribute locally. So that we see uses for these vary depending on the state and the need for it. But overall, we think this works really well. I will remind you that because we're so secure, we recommend chat. Chat gives us the opportunity to share documents securely if we need to. Also, phone works really well too, but if we ever need to share a document or do something securely, we will send them over to chat and pick up the conversation where we left off. Okay, let's go back to diplomacenter.com. So I added a test center here. You can see that this test center ID on the left-hand side, 17571, it's a local number that we use internally to organize our test centers. The number that we're actually looking for when you register for your account with Diploma Center is this publisher ID number. So add those numbers to your registration and we will add it to your account. So when you log in, you have a screen of your test centers that you work with. Okay, so let's go to the top right-hand corner. I'm going to zoom in, don't get dizzy, click search, and then I'm going to click test takers. So this screen will give me, man, I think there's 8 or 9 fields that I could fill in. The more information you give the search, the more accurate your search results will be. When Diploma Center is talking to a test taker, we ask for 4 key pieces of information to verify they are who they say they are, right? We don't want to talk to somebody's mom or dad. If there's ever a reason why a test taker has someone advocating for them, we want the test taker also on the call so we can talk to the test taker directly. There are obviously some special cases where that's not possible, but for the most part, I think about 99% of the time we want to talk directly to the test taker. So while you're searching for this information, we also suggest that you all use the same idea, 4 key pieces of information to have accurate search results. Of course, I'm going to break that rule because I'm presenting to you. I'm not going to give you 4 key pieces of information. I am just going to type in a person we've made up to test our code, which is someone by the name of first name and last name. You can see at the top left, the jurisdiction is automatically selected. The type of record that we're looking for is the high school equivalency. And I'm going to type in first name, last name. I could type in birth date, also an ID number. And you're like, what is an ID number? Well, let me tell you. An ID number is an unlimited amount of social security number, publisher ID number. It could also be a corrections ID number. We also have, I know that you can pull the number from your passport as well. So international students that have, tested locally, that ID number works as well. So lots of different options here for ID number. Going to click search at the top left-hand corner. And while Diploma Center is pulling data, you can see that the logo spins at the top left-hand corner. So that means it's thinking. And the search results, you get a nice yellow bar in the middle of your screen that says, hey, hello, you only gave us two pieces of information. The more information you give us, the more accurate your results are going to be. And we're like, okay, we get that, no problem. And in addition, if you don't see what you need here, what Diploma Sender will do is do an archive request. So if you're very certain that this person tested and that they need to find their information, what Diploma Sender does is we look into our archives, which is our paper records. That's another presentation for another day because it's rather lengthy, but trust that if you don't see the record here, and let's say it's prior to 2002, Diploma Sender will do an archive research request. We actually have a team of individuals that work at the warehouse. So again, another presentation for another time. I'll stop myself there.
Abigail, could I
Yes,
interrupt for a minute?
sure.
We have two questions in the chat, and I think you were talking about being a test center.
Yes.
And two of our participants today are not test centers.
Mhm.
And what is the best way to access the card without creating a test center account? Most of our
Sure.
students are not using a test center. They are using the online proctored GED test. And so that person has the same question as above. What's the best way to access the card?
Sure, that's a great question. If you are not, the short answer is all of our government accounts, when they log into Diploma Center, have the option to download that card. So it's available for those that work within secure facilities. It's also available for a position we call educational providers. The other main government account is actually for jurisdictional administrators like Amanda and Whitney. So the card is available for any time you log in. But for this specific case, I regret being so specific, but it's for any type of government account. As soon as you log in, it's in that blue bar at the top of the screen. If it's also helpful, I will recap this meeting and send a PDF to Amanda and Whitney so they have it and they can also distribute locally as well.
Thank you.
Sure,
And,
yeah.
this may be another presentation. Is it possible for an adult education program administrator who does not have a test center to get that education provider role or no?
Yes, absolutely. It all comes down to registration. So I'm going to pause this presentation, which could make everybody very confused, but let's come back to this in 1 second. I'm gonna actually open a new tab. So when you head to diplomacenter.com, to Amanda's question, I'm going to let you know that we ask a series of questions that will help pinpoint the type of account you need, and we do that through the registration process. So the same registration process starting point for both test takers and government account holders. So everybody clicks register. So we're going to click register here, and it says, who are you? And you're like, okay, this is so friendly. Who are you? Answer the questions to determine the best account type for you. So we're looking for HSE records. Did you take the HSE test? No. Did you earn any of these programs? No. So these two questions right here are eliminating the test taker themselves. So if someone were to say yes, then we would start figuring out when they tested, what type of test account they needed, et cetera. So set that aside. We did say that we did not test. And now what we want to know, did you work in a correctional facility? So for this case, again, no, we did not work in a correctional facility. Do you personally teach high school equivalency preparation? So if I were to click yes here, I would select my jurisdiction for Pennsylvania. And it says I am an educational provider. And that's the second account type that we have available for government account users. That is probably it's probably the second most popular. But this educational provider access gives you a different type of view of the data. And it is a separate presentation. And Amanda, if I need to switch gears and kind of change the demo to an educational provider, because that would be more fitting for this group, I am happy to do so. We also could set up a second presentation and we could do this for the educational providers at another time.
If it's not too much of a hassle, sorry, yeah, this might be
Yeah,
might be the more general one.
sure, let's do that. I'm going to,
sorry about that.
don't be sorry. It'll take me, you guys get to see this happen behind the scenes. I'm going to log in as my account type and change out our demo user. So if you like, just, I never type the right way when someone's watching, but I guess when 80 people are watching, you'd work rather well. Let's see. Okay, let's change this person to, going to update. Okay, let's go back here, click log out, going to log in. as demo, fill record. Okay, so the blue bar is not there, which means we found a little bug while we were talking today, which is good. So we'll tell our IT team to add that back in there. Actually, I'm going to write that note right now. Okay, we'll get that added for you all. It usually is there, but that's okay. I think that's what happens when you're doing a presentation. It's not there. So when you land on the home screen for an educational provider, you are not looking at test centers because your access to Diploma Center is the entire state of Pennsylvania. So you're able to look at all of the testers whose the latest test was in Pennsylvania at a Pennsylvania testing center. So I'm going to do the similar search for first name and last name and click search. And I'm going to show you that the search results, again, will tell you, hey, more information, the better. So you're still getting that yellow bar here. And you're also still able to submit a research request or an archive request here. At the very top of the search results, you'll see tester ID on the left-hand side. By the way, because we are so compliant with security protocols like SOC 2 Type 2 and FERPA, if you do need to talk about a test taker with Diploma Center, please do not send any of their personal information in an email. Always send the tester ID, which is provided over here on the left-hand side, because this number, which you can copy to clipboard and paste in an email, is only good within Diploma Center. So it has no value outside of DS, which protects the test taker. Email isn't secure, and we do not have external secure messages. We do have secure internal messages, but not externally. So we ask that you use the tester ID when communicating on behalf of the test taker. Okay, then that sidebar, let's look at these columns: tester ID, first name, last name, birth date, address, and status. So this left-hand side will be very helpful for most of you. You can see the status of the tester. I can sort the status by just clicking the column. And what you're seeing is pass and credential, pass and then credential. So let's look at a pass credential tester. I'm going to go back over to the left-hand side. As I float my cursor over the tester ID, I have an option to select that caret. Well, I showed you the copy to clipboard, but this might be helpful for everybody on the call. You have access to download 2 reports for individual testers. One is their unofficial academic history report. And the second type of report is the unofficial score report. And both of these will give you a look at the tester's testing history. And then you can also look at their complete, kind of like the unofficial academic history report is a comprehensive look of every single test the tester has taken. Whereas the unofficial score report is very similar to a transcript. Note that it's unofficial, but it's because it gives the best scores. So it's pulling out the best scores for that individual and putting it on a report that's printer friendly. If you need it, it also includes the status of the tester, as well as their first name and date of birth. So the unofficial score report, very similar to a transcript, gives the status, the publisher, also the test taker's first and last name and their date of birth. And then the other report, which I've already kind of skimmed over, is the unofficial academic history report. With this test taker that we have on the demo screen, there are 4 tests that have been taken. Again, if they had tested many more times, we would put all of their tests on here, including practice tests. Okay, so that's pretty much it for this role. So the educational provider, again, can search, where is my screen? I'm on the wrong one. Can search first name and last name and date of birth ID number. So the more information you give, the more accurate your results are. And you can see the status of the tester from the screen and also download 2 reports for each individual, a comprehensive look at their academic record, and then also the unofficial score report. The last part about your access, which would be helpful for you, is the reports tab. So I got here by clicking the top right-hand corner, click reports. And you have a list of the most popular reports that we have heard. So the squeaky wheel gets what we need, right? So if you see something that you need as far as a report goes, let us know. We'll be happy to work with you and work with Amanda to make sure it's information you should have access to, number 1. And number 2, it's going to be helpful for you in moving programs forward. The most popular reports are these PIN. So PIN stands for pass, incomplete, and non-pass. And we've kind of separated out by age, county, language, publisher, test center, and PII. For time purposes, Let's just select pin by publisher for this one. So to open a report, I'm going to click pin by publisher. At the top left-hand corner, you can see that I can populate this report in raw data, so CSV, similar to an Excel spreadsheet, or PDF. I'm going to choose PDF because it's always a little prettier and you can print it out if you need to. For earliest test date, I am looking across the whole state of Pennsylvania, so let's not go too far back because we don't want to pull a lot of data, and for demo purposes, this could take a minute. So let's just choose June 1 through today's date. After I have the date selected, you'll notice that you cannot customize the jurisdiction abbreviation or the test center numbers. We're pulling all of the data for all of the test centers across Pennsylvania. Click render. And as it's pulling the data, you'll notice that Diploma Center logo is spinning like the old-fashioned Dairy Queen sign. So that'll pull data. I am using Google Chrome, so my report will populate at the top right-hand corner, which, you know, to be honest, I kind of miss the old Google Chrome when the report would come at the bottom of the screen in the tray. Just made so much more sense, but that's okay. We love change, don't we? So as this is pulling, are there any other questions that you all have? Okay, so
Yes, there is a question in the chat.
okay.
If we get an education provider account, do our students need to be linked with us in any way for us to be able to gain access to their information in Diploma Center?
No, that's a great question. You do not need to ever link with a tester to access their data because an educational provider has access to all testers within the assigned jurisdiction. So in this case, Pennsylvania.
And you have records that go back 20 years?
Oh my gosh, our records go back. So short answer, yes. But Diploma
Okay.
Center has access to all of HSE records in Pennsylvania going all the way back to the first test ever taken in 1942. So we have microfiche, microfilm, index cards, green bar paper for going all the way back. And we can
Okay.
access that if we need to.
Thank you.
Yeah,
And
I'm
then Amanda,
gonna,
there's a question for you in the chat, Amanda.
okay. I think the one thing that you need to be clear on is, so first of all, I believe I need to approve an education provider access, right? You can't just submit it. The other thing is, if I approve you for it, you have access to very confidential information. So you need to be extremely careful with the privilege that you're being given. And if you ever leave, you need to, inform Diploma Center right away that you no longer are in a position to need this. And, I think I will only approve one person per agency because you now have access to an awful lot of things. So if you're accessing this, you need to access it in private, in an area where no one can see your screen and all of those things. So,
Diploma Center has some awesome security protocols and processes in place. I'll speak to two of them. One, after 45 days of inactivity, your account is deactivated. And in order to access your account, you have to request reactivation, which is then set to state administration for review and approval. Another thing to mention is, as I remember, like Big Brother watching, Big Brother's watching all of us on a very, it's interesting. We're tracking IP addresses to make sure that whoever has access is the person accessing the data, according to, what has happened historically. Years ago, people would have one login for multiple people, and we are noticing this has had to do with third parties. So they were accessing the same account in Delaware at 1 minute, and then they were in Nevada within an hour. We're like, how is that possible? So we're tracking that. We pay attention to it, and all of our questions for account management go directly to state. The state administration has approved. And once you do have access to Diploma Center and you have been approved, that's where you can contact government support to ask all of the questions about using Diploma Center, because at that point you're trusted, and you have been basically given the 2 thumbs up from state administration.
So there are a couple questions
Sure.
that I'll address quickly, but I don't want to take too much time. Hey, there was a question about does diploma sender need to be added to the third-party release? You know, I know, because once you have education provider access, you have access to everyone. So, you know, you either have access or you don't. And then there was a second question that says, so the educational provider account could allow us to verify if an individual has earned their high school equivalency diploma. For example, a new student comes to our program and thinks they have their diploma. Would this account allow us to verify that, and then we could help them create that account?
Yes, absolutely. Anytime you can use this account to remove barriers for test takers, do it. The only thing we ask is that term verification has two meanings: one, internal use only, and two, external use. So internal use is exactly what the question just described. External use, when you have someone other than the test taker asking for verification, FERPA says absolutely not. We need a paper record, we need a track record of this verification. It cannot be verbal. It has to go through, in this case, we are the vendor of choice, so it has to go through Diploma Center. So if you have someone else asking for a tester's status, just send them to Diploma Center. Use the same, it's the same number, same chat feature, and we have 10 or 11 individuals at all time ready to help. So that answer, I hope, is very clear. If it's internal use to help that test taker, you're talking directly to them and you want to access their information, do it. You know, we don't want to hinder or get in the way of that tester moving forward with their lives, if you will. And B, if it's an external, like a third party for a verification for employment or school, nope, we got to do it through Diploma Center. We have processes in place. We have a quick turnaround time. So send them over to us. This conversation can continue. So I will just let you know that we could talk about this for so long. I'm going to stop myself and let you all know that if you have separate questions, you can start with government support. I will put my email address in the chat. So if you have specific questions about what we talked about today, I'll be happy to help you. And then I also can't stress enough that this is just the beginning. So we talked a lot about new information that you're hearing for the first time. We need to have more conversations, separate presentations. Please don't hesitate to reach out. I'm going to stop sharing. There we go. And then I'm dropping my email address.
So I don't see any more questions in the chat at the moment.
Awesome.
I will mention that a while back during Amanda's presentation, Whitney dropped the link to that survey that Amanda mentioned, that HiSET related survey. So that link is in the chat. You'll have to scroll back to like the sort of back to the beginning of the chat if you wanted to access that link. And it looks like Abigail has just put her email in the chat for anybody who wants to spam her email box. And so do we have any other questions for Abigail while she's here?
Just want to say thank you, everybody. I appreciate your time. I know there's a lot going on in your worlds, especially this time of year. So just thanks for taking the time to listen. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I think I wasn't aware of that particular role in there myself. I was thinking the test center roles that you were helping with people with. So we'll kind of figure something out here in Pennsylvania to make sure that, you know, people have the program administrators have access without maybe giving too many people access.
There, I will, am I off mute? Okay, so North Carolina, very similar volume of testers to Pennsylvania. And the system set up, Amanda, we can talk offline, but it's similar, 1 or 2 individuals per site, and that's it.
Okay.
And there's like cool structures, cool is not the word, but I'm just going to say it. Cool structures in place depending on each jurisdiction. So we can talk about what each state does and how they manage it. And that'll be a great topic for our next call.
Sounds good.
All right, I'm signing off. You guys are awesome. Have a happy Thanksgiving. Talk to y'all later.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Abigail.
Bye. Yep, bye.
And of course, everyone, I was going to say, if you have questions about Diploma Sender, don't send them to your advisors. But any questions, of course, about adult education, please feel free to reach out to your advisors. And I hope everyone has a wonderful Thanksgiving holiday, and we'll talk to you next month.
Thanks, everybody.